Hey guys, welcome to Freedom Fishing. It's been a while since I've done a video. Well, a while, week and a half. I've been sick, diverticulitis flare up, so I'm feeling a little bit better. And I want to remind you why the channel is called Freedom Fishing. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. It's the number one reason. Number two, my wife and I like the freedom of being on the water. Number three, Freedom Boat Club. We're members of Freedom Boat Club, and we use the boat a lot with them, so we love the service of the boat club. But I want to do a video on, since I can't get on the water and fish right now, 5 of my most common rigs that I use when fishing. And I fish inshore mostly, so these are going to mostly be inshore rigs. And this is what I use the most, and I'm going to kind of tell you why I like them. This may not be the way a professional fisherman does it or why they do it, but this is why I fish the way that I fish. So first of all, probably the most common I use is what we call a knocker rig. I call it a knocker rig. Some people call it a fish finder rig. But I've got an egg sinker right up against, on my leader, right up against my hook, so you can see how it can slide back and forth. And I use this mostly if I'm going to be fishing on the bottom, whether it's 30 feet or 3 feet, doesn't really matter. If I'm on the bottom, I like to use a knocker rig with live bait. And the reason I like to use it, or even with dead bait, the reason I like it is I can get this down to the bottom. They go together down to the bottom, and then depending upon the current and what I want it to do, I can give it line and let that sinker drift away from the bait. So I can let my sinker get 3 inches from the bait, 6 inches from the bait, or 5 feet from the bait. There's a spot I fish under a dock, and I will sometimes let it hit the bottom, feel it hit the bottom, got my finger on the line, so I know when the sinker's on the bottom, get it there, and then the current's moving away from me, and then give it 3, 4, 5 feet of line. And so my live shrimp or live mullet or mud minnow, whatever I'm using, it's literally 4 or 5 feet away from this sinker, swimming around on its own. So that's what we call a knocker rig, fish finder rig, and that is my go-to rig when I'm fishing on the bottom. Now I did this to make this easy for you. I'm just gonna pop that right off of there. Of course that will be tied to my braid if I was fishing, but I just pop that off of there. Now I'm gonna go to maybe my favorite way to fish. I don't get to do this very often, but if I'm in skinny water, no current, very little current, and shallow water, I just love a Freeline rig, and it's as simple as it sounds. It's Freeline. It's a hook. I usually use a 2/0 circle hook. That's the size I use most of the time using live bait for the kind of fish, redfish, trout, flounder I'm fishing for. A 2/0 circle hook. Freeline. No weight. One of my videos I did on the top 10 tips to catch more fish. The less weight possible, I believe, is important. You can feel everything the less weight you have. And this is Freeline. You just throw that live bait out there, or even dead bait, let it sink to the bottom or swim and do its own thing, and it's very natural that way. So this is what I call a Freeline rig. Most people call Freeline, and I love to fish that way. I don't get to fish that much. I fish in the intercoastal here, and the current's moving pretty strong most of the time, and it's hard to do this with a lot of current, but with very little current, you can do this. And then next to that, Freeline, my next one, with just a split shot. So all I do is add a split shot to that. And one thing I love about Freeline, I can start off in a stagnant tide in shallow water with a Freeline. Then the current picks up a little bit. I can throw one split shot on there. It picks up a little bit more. I can throw another split shot on here. I'm not going to throw 4 or 5 split shots. I'll then eventually move to an egg sinker or something. But real simple. I just threw a split shot on there with my Freeline and my 2/0 circle hook. And I've got a Freeline rig, kind of, but with just a little bit of weight. And you'll just determine the amount of weight you want based on the kind of fish and the depth you're in. Alrighty, so now we're gonna move to a very popular way to fish. I don't fish this way a lot, but I do use a Carolina rig a decent amount. And I know people do this differently, but I've got my main line here, my braid, to an egg sinker. And then I've got my separator here, my little glass bead to plastic bead to between that and the double barrel swivel to my leader down to my hook. Now the reason this is really important to have this bead on here is that bead is going to protect the knot you've tied to your swivel, because that sinker is going to move. You see that swivel is moving back and forth, and it's going to hit that swivel, and so that bead is helping protect that. And I think too, it makes a little bit of noise, and it also adds a little bit of color. But this is a Carolina rig. A lot of people do this when they bass fish. But the reason I would use this is when I'm fishing near the bottom, but not on the bottom. I really like this kind of rig. I can get down to the bottom, let my sinker hit the bottom, reel it up a couple of feet based on how much leader I have. And I know that my hook is separated from my sinker and I'm not on the bottom. I don't like a knocker rig if I'm not on the bottom because that sinker is right here by the hook. And I know fish, they're not that smart, they'll still eat that, but I think it's better to have that sinker separated from the hook. And that's when I use a Carolina rig most of the time, is when I'm near the bottom but not on the bottom. I will do this and in shallower water. So that's a Carolina rig, egg sinker on my main braid, to my bead, to my swivel, obviously my leader, and then down to my hook. And then the last way, and maybe my favorite way, I just love to float fish or to bobber fish, or if this is a popping cork. So what I've learned to do recently with the popping cork, this is something that I've recently learned to do, is I used to tie my main braid to the top of my popping cork, right to that swivel there, and then I got my popping cork. Well, what happens is that braid's very flimsy, and it will get caught up in here. So I actually watched someone else's video because I'm always trying to learn, and he had said that he puts leader line, this is 15-pound leader line on here, takes his leader, and then I'll use an Albert knot. I use an Albert knot, by the way, with all of these rigs when I'm tying my leader to my main braid. But then tie an Albert knot for my leader to my main braid here. And having this leader here, separating the braid from the popping cork to float, allows it to not get frayed up and caught on here. So that's just a little secret, something I've been doing recently helps. The popping cork, you're just popping that back and forth, and this isn't about how to use it technically, but you cast it out and you pop it every once in a while and it attracts noise. I just love a popping cork in a float. And then I've got my, depending upon the depth of the water you're in, I've got here about 20 inches or so of leader. I'm using 15-pound leader on here, and I've got a 2/0 circle hook just like I have with all the others. You can also put artificial on here. I love putting a gulp shrimp or a voodoo shrimp at the bottom of this popping cork and just popping it. You get a lot of action that way, or you can put live bait on here just as well. I find when I have live bait, I don't pop it as often or as aggressively because that live bait might come off. The artificial's tied on there, and so you don't have to risk it coming off. So that's a popping cork or a float rig. I love to fish this way when I don't have a really strong current and I don't have really deep water. I love fishing like this. So those are my 5 top rigs that I use the most. I use a knocker rig. Some people call it a fish finder rig, knocker rig. I use that a lot when I'm on the bottom. Then the Carolina rig when I'm near the bottom but not on the bottom. That's what I like, how I like to use it. I've got my Freeline rig. I'm just using a live bait or a dead bait with no weight at all on a circle hook. Then I've got my Freeline weight with a split shot or 2 split shots. One little secret about the freelining with split shots, again, I learned this from another guy in a video recently. Don't put your split shots all together. It creates an imbalance in the line and will cause your hook to fray up here. Separate your split shots. So if I was gonna have 2 split shots, I'd have one here and one probably about here. Separate them so it more evenly distributes the weight, less likely to get caught up when I'm casting. And if I had 3, and sometimes I will fish with 3, then I would have one here, and I would have another one on top. And separating them about the same distance, that really helps prevent them from getting all tangled up. And then the popping cork and the float, of course, which I just talked about. So I hope this helps you catch more fish. Thanks for watching the video. Please like and subscribe and share. It really helps the channel. Thanks for all you guys do. And I am going to Pensacola this weekend with my grandkids. I'm starting to feel better. The medication's kicking in, so we are going to try to fish and catch some fish. And hopefully I'll have a video next week with some fish on it. Thanks for watching, guys. God bless. Have a great night.